Hello everyone, welcome to this video which is covering chapter 17, 18, 19 and 20 of Frankenstein. We've seen before in chapter 16 that the creature has narrated his tale to Victor, so he's now fully up to, his narrative is finished and is kind of fully up to date with the kind of plot, the kind of story within a story. And he has given his demand at the end of chapter 16 to create the female creature, a nice kind of cliffhanger, for want of a better phrase, to end that chapter on. And chapter 17 starts with the kind of Victor's response to that, as well as the creature's reasoning to get him to do something. And I think sometimes we think of Frankenstein as, or you can think of Frankenstein as a metaphor for a parent-child relationship, and very much the language in here is like that, and the behaviour is as well, because the creature is entreating Victor to create a female creature, and he is using all the full range of narrative devices to persuade Victor to do something he doesn't want to do, or doesn't initially want to do. So he demands for a female creature. Victor initially refuses, on page 111 as you can see, and the creature responds with reason. And Victor refuses because he's worried about the joint wickedness that the kind of female creature and the creature might create. The creature says, "I am malicious because I am miserable." He uses reason. He's miserable, he's alone, he is his companion. He has been rejected by humanity and mankind throughout the novel. And so obviously that has led him to be wicked. His own creator has rejected him at every opportunity. So while we, it's the nature versus nurture argument, while we can perhaps understand why the creature feels this way and we can empathise with the creature, we can't fully ever support his murderous acts. But we can understand, and this request is perfectly reasonable. He then kind of says, "Look, shall I respect man when he condemns me? I will revenge my injuries. If I cannot inspire love, I will cause fear." So there's kind of a threat there as well to Victor. I will revenge. Look, if I can't inspire love, if humanity is going to reject me and not let me kind of live, then fear is what I will cause. So a lot of people tend to feel empathy for the creature throughout, and rightly so as well. But it is really important to know Frankenstein isn't just a novel about, poor creature, he's mistreated by humanity. He is perfectly capable of, because at this point he has murdered several people and, kind of more murder is to come. He is more than happy to cause fear, to wreak revenge and be malicious, be evil if he needs to as well. And it's interesting that a fiendish rage animated him as he said this. What's quite interesting, the way that Shelley tells the story, Victor is the narrator of this part of the novel. We can hear in this particular moment. So whether he has a fiendish rage, whether this is the creature getting overexcited because he can perhaps see that he's successful, and Victor as a narrator is actually misinterpreting this, as he does several times throughout the novel, is quite an interesting point. Or whether the creature is getting kind of overwhelmed, and actually, perhaps there is reason for Victor to pause here and to deny the request as well. The creature checked himself, but he gives this kind of speech about how they should be happy, harmless and free from the misery. And it has an effect on Victor. I was moved. For the first time in Victor's life, for the first time in the story, he actually starts to appreciate the creature's request. And this is paralleled later on, following Victor's death, when the creature kind of meets Henry Clerval, who responds initially with aggression, and then actually, once you actually meet the creature and speak to him, he moves. He is kind of capable of reason and creating a reasoned argument. The creature then says he's going to go to South America or go to the kind of North Pole. They will go far away. You don't need to worry about us. We'll be happy. The Victor still has more questions. How can you, who long for the love and sympathy of man, persevere in this exile? That's a really interesting point. The creature has wanted to be, and you could argue that his hamartia is that he wants to be part of humanity more than anything else. He is made of human body parts. Rightly, when he sees Safi in the kind of De Lacy's cottage, he thinks he can belong to humanity. But Victor asks, look, you've spent the entire novel here trying to be part of humanity. So, how can you guarantee that you will stay in exile? And it's a perfectly rational fear as well here. The creature responds by saying, how inconstant are your feelings? But a moment ago you were moved by my representations. Again, that hamartia of the creatures here, of wanting to fit in as part of humanity, is represented in this quotation, because all human beings are inconstant. You know, we'd like to think that people do the right thing all the time, or some people do the wrong thing, but actually we all change our mind. We are human, we all make mistakes, and the creature here is trying to he's naive in his view that he thinks that Victor is just going to do exactly what he should do, what is morally right, even if he's given a really, really reasoned speech. And you know, think about this as a kind of other wider themes you can bring in. You know, if we have Victor as representing an upper class, you know, the kind of the bourgeoisie in society, they should do certain things. They should the morally right thing to do is to create the female creature and trust the creature. But sometimes they don't do the right thing, however you might want to try and persuade them as well. And it's quite an interesting kind of wider theme to bring in there. And Victor rightly says, you swear to be harmless, but have you not already shown a degree of malice that should reasonably make me distrust you? I mean, he has. He's murdered people, and he's lied to have Justine executed. He's wreaked revenge. You know, he's destroyed the De Lacy cottage. He's murdered. You know, he's committed the crime of infanticide. He's murdered a child. So clearly, there is reason to distrust here as well. And it's interesting that Shelley presents the creature's response by, how is this? I must not be trifled with, and I demand an answer. The creature isn't just this innocent being. It's really important you note that in your analysis, because he responds by not responding, by saying, I must not be trifled with. Victor's not trifling. He's asking a perfectly reasonable question. Hold on a minute, you've murdered several people already. How can I trust you? And the creature responds with aggression. And it's really nice. When we're talking about the fiendish rage that we've seen here, we can put that down to Victor's interpretation. Victor is the one looking at the creature speaking, so we see what Victor infers from the creature's behaviour through Shelley's choice of narrative voice here. But we now hear from the creature through dialogue that actually he is aggressive towards Victor when Victor is asking a perfectly reasonable question. You know, Victor is a negligent character. He has done lots and lots of bad things in the novel, but here this question is valid and the creature responds with aggression. Victor reflects then, and he consents at the end of page 113 to create the female creature, and the creature then says, I swear by the sun and the blue sky of heaven and by the fire of love that burns within my heart, if you grant my prayer, while they exist you should never behold me again. Just a kind of aside, it's interesting the creature doesn't pray to a god, perhaps suggesting, you know, corruption. Bear in mind Shelley's parents, Percy Shelley, her husband, were revolutionaries. The creature swears by the sun, he does mention heaven I suppose, but the blue sky and the fire of love that burns within my heart. He swears on nature, something that he has known, nature almost as a surrogate mother to the creature, who has been more of a parent than Victor ever will be. And the creature then runs off. Victor is left to deal with the consequences, and then in chapter 18 he kind of goes back to Geneva from meeting the creature, and he's struggling to kind of develop the ability to create the female creature. Alphonse, his father, speaks to him about getting married to Elizabeth. Alphonse is getting older and he wants to see them married. Victor replies by saying, yes, don't worry, you know, we would like to get married, and he's happy. And then he says, alas, to me the idea of an immediate union with my Elizabeth, remember the possessive pronoun, he treats her as an object, was one of horror and dismay. It's a really interesting point, this. He's horrified and dismayed because he's got to create the female creature. He said he's going to do something. He's bound by a solemn promise. So the horror and dismay is not because he's marrying Elizabeth, it's because he's got this other job to do first. But it could also be, thinking of deeper meanings or alternative interpretations, if he's married to Elizabeth, he loses the life of a scientist. You know, he has to be kind of, if you like, paternal Victor Frankenstein, start a family, you know, have children. And he loses the kind of the secretive life that he's had to this point in the novel. And actually, although the horror and dismay is because of creating the female creature, it could also be the horror and dismay of giving up the kind of the ambition that led. And the solemn promise he's bound by is to the creature, which I've not yet fulfilled and dare not break. And he breaks it, you know, he massively breaks it, and we'll see that later on in this video. But also, if he's going to get married to Elizabeth, he's bound by a more solemn promise. which is the promise, the wedding vows that you make. And here he's breaking those promises already to Elizabeth because he's not told her. He tells her nothing about his past. That one person that you love more than anything in the world to get married to, he keeps this secret from her. We kind of, in modern relationships, if people keep something secret, that's a kind of a relationship breaker. And here it's exactly the same for Victor Frankenstein. He's bound by a solemn promise to the creature, which he had not yet fulfilled and dared not break, which he breaks. But he also breaks the solemn promise to my Elizabeth, because he doesn't tell her. He has secrets from her, and he doesn't tell her about things which ultimately lead to her death. And whether you get a question on Elizabeth in the exam or not is a kind of a moot point, really, because she's a brilliant character to discuss, because she is the victim of the patriarchy throughout Frankenstein. She is her future as a possession of Victor Frankenstein, her father, when she's given away into poverty, then passed on to Alphonse, passed on to Victor. It's a damning indictment of how women were treated at the time of the novel by a female author in Mary Shelley, who is similarly poorly treated by her own father and her husband as well. Victor then goes off to England, or he makes a plan to go to England with Henry Clerval. They go off to England, and chapter 18 and 19, there's a lot to further the narrative, but not a lot necessarily in terms of analysis here. He goes away, and Clerval meets him in Strasbourg on the kind of French-German border. Alas, how great was the contrast between us. He was alive to every new scene, joyful when he saw the beauties of the setting sun. So Clerval joins him on their little road trip through kind of Germany, France, England. And this was a common trip for people of the time from wealthy families. Lots of people in the 1800s would do the grand tour of European cities. And if you go and travel around Italy as well. So Clerval goes with Victor, but of course Clerval is the foil that Shelley presents to Victor's character. Whereas Victor is miserable on this journey, Clerval is full of joy. He is happy. He's alive to every new scene. He's excited because he's going on this great trip with his best friend. But Victor is he can't celebrate in this joy as well. And it's quite a poignant memory because, of course, a couple of chapters' time, and this kind of foreshadows his death, really. Shelley presents these contrasts, or these moments of dramatic irony. The alas here, how great was the contrast between us. Past tense, Victor's looking back. He knows that Victor dies, and we don't know yet as a reader, but we know it's kind of coming, because Shelley foreshadows this death and presents this kind of joyful moments to contrast with the horror of his death later on. And there's a kind of a eulogy on page 120 to his dead friend here. Clerval, beloved friend, even now it delights me to record your words. Clerval, remember, is a foil to Victor's character. He's the kind of opposite of Victor, really. And he has all these lovely kind of romantic feelings with a capital R. He's powered by nature in the same way that the creature is, kind of empowered by nature. He kind of shares kind of poetry as well, compared to Victor's more methodical and scientific and perhaps more unfeeling approach as well there. And then chapter 19, they arrive in London, so they go through Strasbourg, which has kind of changed as part of Germany and France throughout the years. They go through Cologne in Germany, they go up to Holland, to Rotterdam, and then they get the kind of ferry across to England, quite a modern kind of modern day route as well. And then they arrive in Gravesend Port, they go up through Woolwich and Greenwich into London. And they kind of stay in London for a couple of days in chapter 19. They keep kind of going through, and they travel through London. They arrive in October. They head north. We did not intend to follow the Great Road to Edinburgh, but to visit Windsor, Oxford, Matlock and the Cumberland Lakes. So they go kind of through. And Victor says, I'm going to finish my labours in some obscure nook in the Northern Highlands of Scotland. They go to Oxford. So this is all just their story of kind of where they go. They go up through Derbyshire. And Clerval's still happy because of all this beautiful nature. You notice there's not a lot of highlighting or annotation here. It's perfectly reasonable that you could get this as an extract. but there's not too much in terms of analysis, really. There's the contrast and the presentation of Victor and Clerval as a foil for each other, but this is designed to further the narrative. It moves on at quite a quick pace as well here. Victor's scarcely visited the various lakes of Cumberland, Westmoreland. He's going up and north of the border, so it's a bit like kind of, going on a road trip, starting in London and kind of driving right the way through to the north as well. Goes to Edinburgh. Clerval didn't like it as well as Oxford, and then I told Clerval I wish to make the tour of Scotland alone. So there's kind of a moment where they split up as well. I may be absent a month or two. Henry wished to dissuade me, but seeing me bent on this plan ceased to remonstrate. So they deviate there as well, which again wasn't an uncommon thing to do. I know it sounds a bit strange to go on holiday with your best friend now and then say, oh, actually, while we're in America, say I'm gonna go off for a month or two on my own. But it's something that people did. Some people wanted to see different parts of the world for different sorts of reasons as well there. So they separate and Victor travels to the Orkney Islands, which are off the north coast of Scotland. He gets there, he arrives and he starts to work on the female creature. And then we're on to chapter 20 here as well. So chapter 20, it's interesting, the sun had set, quite a lot of natural imagery used in literature. The moon was just rising from the sea. I've not highlighted this, but it's quite a nice point, really. This will be a nice extract to get in an exam. The sun had set, so Victor's in darkness. Darkness is often used as a motif in literature for evil. What Victor is doing is evil. The creation of the creature was bad, but the creation of the female creature is even worse. And the moon was just rising from the sea. The moon perhaps as a symbol of new light or darkness, but also thinking about what happens in this chapter. The creature travels by sea and is just rising from the sea at this moment. So it's a lovely little motif from Shelley of kind of light and darkness. The moon reflects the sun's rays here. The moon is, if you like, a kind of not a byproduct as such, but a reflection of the sun, and we've got Victor as the sun and the creature as the moon. There's some lovely imagery at the start of this chapter. So Victor's making the creature, and he's thinking while he's making the creature. 3 years since before I was engaged in the same manner. He had sworn to quit the neighbourhood of man and hide himself in the deserts, but she had not. And she, who in all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal, might refuse to comply with a compact made before her creation. This is quite an interesting point to make, and it's probably worthwhile thinking about in terms of your analysis, but also in terms of wider ideas in the novel. A couple of things. First of all, the creature is entirely innocent and naive. His hamartia is wanting to be part of humanity, but it's also his childlike naivety. He believes too often in the kind of the goodness of man, and he fails because the tragedy is he's met by evil at every point in the novel. He believes that he will have a female creature and she will be controlled and they will go off to some far-flung corner of the earth and be perfectly happy. But Victor rightly says, in all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal, might refuse to comply with a compact made before her creation. The creature has grown to be a sophisticated animal, almost, as intelligent, if not more intelligent, than the humans he encounters. So if the female creature grows to a similar level of intelligence, she might be keen to revolt against their wedding, their matrimony. While the creature's like, yeah, we will go, don't worry, if we believe him or not, we'll go to the North Pole or we'll go to the South Africa, we'll get out of your way. The female creature has made no such agreement. So the female creature might reject the male creature. They might even hate each other. They might argue, they might fight, just as people in society do. And Victor's thinking about all this. And it's interesting because, of course, Elizabeth, as a kind of a parallel to this, has absolutely no choice in the matter. She's kind of, she's married to Victor against her wishes. But the female creature, Victor thinks, potentially the creature may want to seek companionship with a male as well, a human male as well. And so Victor has all these questions. She might turn with disgust from him to the superior beauty of man. She might quit him and he be again alone as well. So all these kind of thoughts fill his head. all these kind of potentially revolutionary aspects that the female creature might have. And there's a nice link here between Victor's life and the Bible. The Garden of Eden, where Eve, the female character, was tempted by the snake to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, and then gave that fruit to Adam. So a couple of things could happen. First of all, Eve was the temptress, and the female creature might be the kind of the temptress or the evil one. And also that female creature might then tempt the male creature to break his promises as well. So even in quite a fairly kind of straightforward quotation, there's a lot of ideas that you can unpack there, which you do get credited for in the mark scheme. How do I write for my own benefit to inflict this curse on everlasting generations? It's quite an interesting point that Victor's making here, because we're led to believe that he's making this creature for the benefit of his son, if you like, the creature. But still, even at this kind of, with everything that's happened, for my own benefit, his hamartia is that kind of, he's driven by power to the extent that he breaks natural law. And here he's kind of saying, actually, is he creating the creature for the benefit of the creature, or is it just for his own benefit? Is he still thinking about himself in a selfish way as well? And then Victor's still kind of looking up in the darkness, and he trembled, and my heart failed within me. When on looking up, I saw by the light of the moon the demon at the casement. A ghastly grin wrinkled his lips as he gazed upon me. The grin is quite a popular motif. It's a ghastly grin here. My heart failed. The creature is hideous, and the creature's appearance is designed to create a sense of terror. And there's this kind of quite dramatic moment here where the creature appears just after Victor's been thinking all these thoughts. And so we see this through Victor's narrative, that he's unsure, and the creature appears. And Victor sees how hideous the creature is. He sees this ghastly grin. The grin comes to represent many things. The creature has had a grin at the start of his creation, which is the grin a child feels on looking at their parent, of happiness. The creature grins here because he's happy. He can see that what he's going to happen is what he wanted is going to happen. But Victor sees this grin as ghastly. He sees this as something kind of, in the way that people might grin if they're smirking at somebody because they've got away with something here, or they're going to do something, or they're going to break a promise here as well. And Victor worries about this here. And he tore to pieces the thing on which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge withdrew. What Victor's doing here, think back to the start of the video, we talked about the parent-child relationship. What Victor has essentially done here is made a promise to the creature and broken that promise. But not only has he broken that promise, he's torn that promise to pieces in front of the eyes of his son, of his creature. It's a bit like kind of getting a Christmas present from your parents, waking up on Christmas morning, and then that being destroyed in front of your eyes there. How horrific a kind of a way to behave. How selfish. It's one thing, I would argue, and again, another idea that you might want to discuss here. It's one thing to promise somebody something. If you don't think you're going to do it, then don't promise to do that as well. That's kind of. But if you're going to promise to do something, then you should do that for your child, for your creature here. Because if you do it and then break that promise, that's even worse morally than not making the promise in the first place. And the creature here, Victor says he has a howl of devilish despair and revenge. I mean, we can empathise with the creature here, because that is a horrific way and a disgusting way to behave from Victor. And it's all really come because of his insecurities and his own kind of fears here, and then the creature sadly arriving at a kind of quite an inopportune moment. So the creature remonstrates with Victor here, and we see here, slave, I before reasoned with you, but you proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. Remember, I have power. You believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched that the light of day will be hateful to you. You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey. And so the creature is furious with Victor, understandably, and refers to Victor as his slave. You have proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. Condescension is when you look down on somebody. So, so the creature's saying here, you're not even worthy of my pity anymore. I have power. I can make you so wretched the light of day will be hateful to you. And this is the creature's threat of revenge here. And there's lots of kind of just, simple nouns here of, kind of master and slave that shows the kind of the imbalance of their relationship and the power that the creature has. Revenge remains. Revenge henceforth dearer than light or food. So remember the creature's kind of childhood here when he was aware that he was hungry, and now revenge is his fuel as well. He's been consumed by hatred. And again, think about nature versus nurture. We have seen now the creature's narrative. We know that he was born as a morally good person. And his nurture, his upbringing, humanity's despicable behaviour, it's ruled now by revenge as his kind of main aim here as well. And there's a lovely quotation we see here: "Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful." He's fearless because everything in his life has been destroyed now. Everything he wanted. He's at his lowest ebb in the novel here, but that also makes him the most dangerous, most powerful, because he doesn't have anything to lose. And Victor still has his father, his best friend, Elizabeth, and the kind of prospect of his union. And the creature plays on this. "It is well I go, but remember, I shall be with you on your wedding night." And from this moment on, there's a lovely moment of dramatic irony, because Victor says, "Before you sign my death warrant, be sure that you are yourself safe." The creature says, "I shall be with you on your wedding night." A lovely simple quotation to learn. It's repeated quite a lot. Victor is here further down the page reflecting on those words. Shelley sets this up superbly, because it's the case of Victor believes, because we see things through Victor's narrative voice, and Victor's not an omniscient narrator. He's kind of, at this stage, he's kind of piecing things together. He's telling us the story, but he's piecing things together. He doesn't know the creature's intentions. And Shelley does this all deliberately, so that Victor actually mistakenly thinks that he is the one going to be killed on the wedding night. And think about the creature as threatened this here. "I can make you so wretched the light of day will be hateful to you." The creature has kind of mentioned that he has no plans for this to be a quick, painless end for Victor here. But Victor believes he is the one that's going to die. And it's Elizabeth who is murdered. But this moment of dramatic irony in the novel that continues for a couple of chapters at least is played superbly by Shelley, because we see through we know as the reader, we know it's Elizabeth. The revenge, the perfect way for revenge. Lex talionis is a Latin phrase for an eye for an eye, justice. The creature isn't going to kill Victor because that wouldn't be justice. He's going to kill Victor's significant other because he has lost a significant other. And this moment of dramatic irony is set up and developed through the next couple of chapters. And Victor's hamartia, or one of potential hamartia, is he is blinded by selfishness. He's blinded by the prospect that my beloved Elizabeth, she should find her lover so barbarously snatched from her. He can't even consider or entertain the idea that it's Elizabeth who's going to be killed. Possibly because the murder of a woman was so horrific to an audience at the time. But we've just seen him do that. So he kind of, the irony is kind of doubled really, because he can't understand. He's saying, the creature wouldn't be too evil to murder a woman, even though he's already murdered a child. But Victor himself has just murdered a woman in front of his creature. And, he's essentially delusional by thinking that anything other than the murder of Elizabeth would happen. And it's set up perfectly by Shelley. And Victor then is obviously, his mental state is agitated here. He kind of leaves the Orkney Islands here. He's kind of sets off in a little skiff, a little boat, and sails out from the shore. And he becomes quite agitated. And essentially, he falls asleep in the boat. He falls asleep in the boat, and the currents kind of blow him away. So at this point, he's in the North Sea, and he washes up somewhere in Ireland. Again, those of you will know the layout of Great Britain. He's basically somewhere here and ends up somewhere here. So I don't know enough about kind of geography and kind of tides and things like that. But he ends up on the shores of Ireland, and he's greeted quite roughly by some Irish citizens who mention the fact that somebody has been murdered very recently. And obviously Victor is then worry. We know that Victor hasn't committed this murder. We've seen what's happened, but also the secret in the novel. He can't tell anyone why this has happened. And the chapter 20 ends with, "I must pause here, for it requires all my fortitude to recall the memory of the frightful events which I'm about to relate in proper detail to my recollection." The frightful events. So he pauses here at the end of the chapter, and we know that something bad is going to come here, and we've perhaps seen that foreshadowed earlier on with the references to the creature's revenge. So that's chapter 17 to 20. Lots of kind of narrative, kind of racing quite through from Geneva to the Orkneys. Quite a quick pace there as well, but some quite key quotations, particularly to explore the relationship between Victor and the creature later on in the novel.